Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Great Ideas. My name is Abhinav and I'm a student at UC Berkeley studying computer science. So, it's a month of January, right? And jumping onto the resolution bandwagon, I also had a few resolutions that I want to follow on. But I want 2020 and the next few years to be a bit different than my previous years, wherein I've not followed on my resolutions. So what happened was that this past summer, I actually became interested in studying high performers and talented people and athletes who actually pursue their goals and are able to fulfill them right till the very end. And I did my own research, read a few papers, read a few books, watched a few talks, and did all my research to actually determine and find out what exactly it is that makes one follow through with their goals and actually achieve them, and what separates those who achieve their goals versus those who don't. And so after my research, I was able to boil down all my lessons into a set of few points that really made sense to me and helped me realize that how do performers achieve their goals? It's not because of some fancy concept that they have in their minds. It's actually a bunch of little things and little tweaks that they make in their day-to-day lives that makes them follow through with their goals. And today I just want to share those lessons that I've learned after doing my own research. And to club it in one word, I would say that essentially when performers pursue and fulfill their goals, they are able to master their goals. And that is what I want to share with you, the process of mastery. The first step in the process of mastery is that goals are problematic. And they're problematic for two main reasons. The first one is that they put your worldview into two distinct static worldviews. Either you achieve your goal or you don't. And that is problematic because it distracts you from the process of actually pursuing the goal in the first place. And the second reason goals are problematic is because focusing on the goal distracts you from doing the thing that is necessary to actually achieve that goal. And that is why I think that having goals per se is very problematic. And goals are only useful for putting you to the practice of pursuing those goals, not anymore. And once you're in the practice of pursuing those goals, the goal then becomes irrelevant. What then becomes relevant is the process of pursuing those goals in the first place. And that is what leads to mastery, and that is what leads to excellence. The second thing I realized was that habit is sustainable, not willpower. I learned that willpower is actually a fixed commodity which only depletes after a certain amount of time, whereas habit is more sustainable and is more long-term in its nature. To give an example, let's say that I want to run a marathon by the end of the year. If I work from a basis of willpower, eventually there will come a point where I will miss my morning practices, I will eat 3 cheat meals in a row, and I will not follow through with my goals. But if I'm working from a place of habit, wherein I'm habituated to follow through with my goals and consistently overperform, then I will not actually miss out on any of the key components of what it takes to run a marathon in the first place. And therefore, what I learned was that habit is something that we should focus on, and building core atomic habits, as James Clear calls it, is critical. And working from a place of willpower will get you only to a certain point, after which you're necessarily bound to not make progress because willpower is a fixed commodity. And Charles Duhigg, in his book The Power of Habit, writes, "Willpower isn't just a skill, it's a muscle. Like the muscles in your arms or legs, and it gets tired as it works harder. So there's less power left over for other things." And so that's the second point, that habit is more sustainable than willpower. The third thing I learned was that no progress is progress. And essentially what it means is that we should learn how to persevere. And Jim Collins, a professor at Stanford, does a great job at explaining perseverance. He gives an example of an egg. He says that from the outside, it appears that one magical day, the chicken breaks out of the egg and out comes a new form of life. But what from the outside we're not able to see is that from the inside, the chicken has actually gone through multiple phases, which is essentially practice in the real world, and is constantly transforming itself to become the chicken that it needs to become. And therefore, perseverance is something that is so key, because even though you may feel as if you're not making progress, you are actually making progress. From the outside, it may not seem as if you're making any progress, because the outside perspective only judges the outcome of what your practice results into. But from the inside, even when you think that you're not making progress, you are, because every time you iterate, every time you work on yourself, there is something or the other that is going on that is pushing you towards the realization of your eventual goal. And that is what high performers and athletes and excellent people who follow through with their goals actually do. And obviously you can persevere in a much more structured format than just staying at the task by just reading about deliberate practice, which is essentially having repeated practice sessions with constant feedback. Which leads me to the fourth thing. Deliberate practice is key. Now, I've talked about deliberate practice as having constant practice with repeated feedback. What that really means is, and how that is different from work or play or any other form of practice, is that at the core of it, it's essentially boring. Think about mastering, say, one particular dance move that you want to master and doing that for 10,000 times. And after you repeat it once, twice, thrice, 4 times, you'll eventually reach a stage wherein you're bored of just practicing that particular move. And that is when real progress begins. Because when you are able to overlearn and overpractice something and deliberately master a specific aspect of, say, a larger goal, that's when you're able to master that particular thing, which leads you on to other things that you can eventually master. And all of that comes together, and it's like a gestalt formation wherein you're then able to aggregate everything and realize that goal in the end. And that is why deliberate practice becomes very important to really realize your goal. The fifth thing I wanted to talk about is talent. Now, a common criticism that is often associated with all these things is that, sure, I practice, I persevere, I have good habits, I don't focus on the goals, everything is going great, but still I don't feel like I'm able to reach that goal because there are many quote-unquote talented people. And from my research, I did learn that yes, while a certain amount of talent does exist and does play a role in someone's success, a lot of it is actually not dependent on talent per se. Nietzsche had a really interesting quote on it that really struck me. He said that to call someone divine means here we do not have to compete. And that really got me thinking, because the moment I call someone talented, and while they may be talented to a certain extent, I'm essentially giving myself the license to not perform as well. And in one of the papers that really struck me, The Mundanity of Excellence, David Chambliss, the author, writes, "In the mystified notion of talent, the unanalyzed pseudo-explanation of outstanding performance, we codify our own deep psychological resistance to the simple reality of the world, to the overwhelming mundanity of excellence." And in his paper, Chambliss actually talks about Olympic-level swimmers and how they are not necessarily talented, but that they have a different form of practice that leads to constant performance and constant delivery above the other competitors. And lastly, after I did all my research and read all about mastering things and how do excellent people perform, I questioned myself and I thought to myself and I said that, all right, let's say that I have my habits fixed. I don't focus on my goals. I do deliberate practice. I am not awed by excellence, whereas I realize that excellence is a mundane phenomenon, and I do all the things that all these high performers are doing. What's the guarantee that I'll reach my end goal or that I'll consistently overperform? Turns out that there is no guarantee. Turns out that the process of mastering is much more important than the state of mastery, which I intuitively sought. And it was hard to come to terms with this at first, but soon I taught myself that yes, while I'm going for the state of having mastered certain things, at the end of the day, it's not the state that counts, but the process that makes you reach that state. And that is what I should truly seek, because once I focus on the process itself, the state is incidental. It's not something that is special, and it therefore becomes mundane. So I actually learned a few differences between success and mastery, and I just wanted to share them because I was able to distill a lot of the points into a few bullet points that really made sense to me and that clarified the difference between being successful and mastering certain things. The first one is that success is static. It's a moment. Whereas mastery is dynamic, it's a process. You might be successful if you are lucky at a certain stage to have won a certain thing in a certain crucial game. But you're a master of a certain thing if you are not reliant on any of the external sources of luck, but that you're just focused on your art, on your craft, and you're able to consistently deliver beyond expectations. That's when you have mastered certain things. The second thing I learned was that success is discrete. You either win or you lose, whereas mastery is continuous. It's about the process itself, and that is something that we have talked about again and again. And the third final point I learned was that success will not teach you grit, whereas mastery is only about grit. The late night grueling practices that you have to endure to master a certain thing over a period of time. That is when you have actually mastered that thing, and that is when you are a true legend, if I can put it that way. And so you might question, why to master things in the first place then if the end result is not guaranteed? Well, the idea is that you should master certain things and you should focus on the process of mastery, because that is what puts you into the state of flow, what the psychologist Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi calls. And that is what we all should pursue, because that is where true fulfillment and happiness lies. And he says that being in a state of flow is essentially when you are indistinguishable from the activity and when time ceases to exist. And I think that that's a really beautiful idea, because think about the times when you were totally absorbed in writing that paper or doing a certain thing that really just dissolved the notion of time for yourself. And that is beautiful, because that's when you are not limited to yourself. That's when you become the activity itself. And just feeling that connection is something that is bound to give each one of us maximum amount of fulfillment. And that's why I think that these 7 steps are just the understanding of how do performers actually over-deliver and deliver beyond expectations consistently is important for us to have. And I just wanted to share these ideas with you. I hope they helped. I hope they helped me too in just, constructing this and structuring this for you. Please feel free to share any feedback that you have. I'd really love to learn, and I'd really love to improve these videos and these ideas and just constantly have back and forth about how we could be better versions of ourselves. Thank you so much for watching.